Hey everyone, quick notice for this episode. Myself and my guest Dan did encounter some technological dropouts during our interview, which means that there are sections missing from the transcript. My editor has worked really hard to make things make as much sense as they can, but it does mean that we've lost a chunk of Dan's third poem. So all the more reason to check out Dan's new book. See what I did there?
Slam poetry.
He doesn't care if it's perfect.
It's time to slam now.
It's the biggest poem I've got inside of me.
She was a thief. You got
To love means to love a haunted house.
Yelling, angry.
Blood-black nothingness began to spin.
Specific point of view on
To
things.
this day, I hate pork chops. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
As T.S. Eliot said, we shall not cease podcasting, and the end of all our podcasting will be to arrive where we started and hear the ep for the first time. Welcome to I Think, Therefore I Slam. My name's Andrew. I hope you're doing well in the middle of this great Australian spring. Very special guest today, continuing our long tradition, our long tradition of people being name dropped and then coming on the show. My guest today was name dropped by our friend Doane Schumer and described as someone with main dish energy or main character energy in the Australian poetry scene, if you like. So it's my pleasure to introduce you all to Dan Hogan. Dan, welcome onto the show.
Hey, Andrew. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
We've managed to carve out some time and overcome some technical difficulties. We're expecting some storms here in Melbourne, so we're going to take our chances. It's going to be thrilling. It's going to be like running a gauntlet, you know, the podcast gauntlet. I have so much to ask you about your debut poetry collection, Dan. I think we would love to hear your first piece from you first. Let's jump straight in.
Yeah, sure. All right. So this poem is from Secret Third Thing, and it's called No Alarms. Give the brigalows time to impersonate metal. Fold the final reminders like bed sheets. Ignore the echoes. Are you revolted the right way? Mosquito into the tidiest corruptions. Zap. Soak the stains. Ear against the wall. Diagnose water hammer. Put the email address here if you are sending a copy you do not want the other recipients to see. It's always home time somewhere, but don't tell anyone. Come bearing data. Using techniques, never live it down. Somewhere a landlord is kissing another landlord. Please clap. Consider the executive sated. Boil the kettle. Pour the tea. Pray for meteorites. Oblivion coldens quickly when there is no one to take a photo. Steam tentacles stopping in the air. Nobody actually knows how to count to 10. Fake it till you make it. Quake happy fault lines at the edge of the whole disgusting sky. Please clap. Not tired, just playing with my 8-ball eyes. Misery during the work shirt donning process. Head hold problems before breakfast. A curse nexus. That feeling when it's Thursday all day. The best part of being stuck in traffic on your way home from work is being late to the work you have to do for work after work. Clouds standing sentinel with their rain bodies above old Guildford. The sky is about to happen. Please clap. Would you say your depression has a purpose? The air might be air-conditioned, but who is ringing the bell? Ignore the previous email. This meal needs a nap. Please remember me to your boss and payroll manager. Dead leaves on the bonnet. New window wipers work. Couldn't sleep because dreams were movies that kept rewinding. Running early for once. Do yourself a favor and don't. Please clap. Do X number of things for Y number of means. Portending the spectre of an ending, remember to send me your bank account details for dinner. Emit an electricity of unshakable compliance until the dawn of a new contract. Slurp, slurp, locomotion and food and why. False mirror enabled, so on and so forth. What is the warmest document type? What is the opposite of a chandelier? Is it fern spores, submission without the act of submission? 10 days sick leave, a multiplicity of forces with no discernible origin. The doctors will call this a way of being on medication. Reports are due. No time to grieve for lost futures. TGIF. Please clap. And that's No Alarms. Thanks.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right. So I think that piece is just a fantastic indication of your debut poetry collection, Secret Third Thing. This book is so intriguing to me, Dan. I said to you that I'm a little bit of a hack in terms of I really enjoy writing and listening to poetry, but I don't have a huge habit of reading a lot of poetry. And so I'm kind of being stretched into finding new creators. And I thought that this was like a combination of almost like a stream of consciousness meets like techno apocalypse meets like, meme culture. And it ties together so well. So can you tell us a bit about the spirit behind this collection and how it all kind of came together for you?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I really love your description there of my poetry. That's really nice. Yeah, to be honest, I'm not dissimilar to you in the way that I consume poetry. Like, I love poetry. I've loved it for a very, very long time. But I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know. I haven't particularly read the classics per se, or whose pulse I'm meant to have my finger on in the last 200 odd years. Whatever.
Yeah.
And I get to speak to like what might be the spirit behind writing Secret Third Thing. I guess I come at poetry generally, and certainly with that book, from more of an interest in language and vernacular and what that means or could mean or says about something or ourselves, rather than, I really love this type of poetry, I want to try that out, which is great, don't get me wrong. I was doing that for a long time, very derivative, imitative sort of stuff that was very bad, but it never matched what my, I guess, interests were in what I wanted to do with my own writing and writing practice. So it definitely, I guess, at the root of it is a fixation on vernacular and what that means socially and politically, I think.
Yeah, amazing. I really enjoyed that there's this kind of reoccurring motif in it as well. About several of the poems in it are about some character and a large suitcase, and how they seem to be going about all these kind of fantastic little adventures, all the while that they've got this suitcase with them that they can't seem to get rid of. So I'm guessing if we were to try and dig into every single, motif and idea and line one by one, we'd be here forever. But what's going on for you with this briefcase idea?
So the briefcase idea, I wrote that. Probably what is more interesting about that poem or narrative thread is the context in which I wrote it. So I remember I was really snowed under with work, and particularly peeved. I had a lot of like unpaid overtime I had to do. So I work as a school teacher, and it was report writing season. So I was just like, you get home from work at 6 o'clock at night, and like, oh great, now I can spend any number of infinite hours writing 15,000 words of reports on my own time, on my own dime. So to procrastinate that, I was reading some Donald Bartlemy, who I'm a huge fan of. And I remember reading a story, I can't remember the name of it for the life of me, but I remember the way that he structured the short story was in these very short, like, epithets that were numbered. As distracted and as much as I was procrastinating, I thought, wouldn't it be kind of funny to write like a poem where that's not dissimilar in structure, but instead of it just being like numbered, they were chapters, as you would see like in a novel. And I guess I was originally imagining it as like a zine, where it would be sort of each line would be presented in this sort of verbose way where it's quite short, but it's a chapter and you're going to move on to the next chapter, and there is 100 and whatever of them. Yeah, so I guess that was where it started. The thing with the briefcase, I'm not sure where. What I think, and this is often how I write, is I'll have an idea inspired by something like I've described there, and then I'll go to any number of notes I have saved in notebooks or note apps or in Google Docs or wherever I've scrambled. So I'm like, okay, I've got this broad idea with like a structure or a gimmick even, but what am I going to play with? What's the substance of the thing going to be? And often, like I was saying before, that I'll go to those notes and it will start with like vernacular. So I would have had probably something recorded, just a line like, I was selling a large suitcase, and I was like, and that seemed pretty funny to me. And I was like, I'm going to start, that's going to be sort of like, I guess, the start of this, and then I'll run off that, but using that format. Yeah, so it started with the gimmick, and then I went to my notes and then ran with it from there. But I wish I could say there was something more meaningful to that sort of that nucleus, but it was more just like I enjoy this funny story and I'm going to, its format in some way, and also what's in my notes. Oh, this funny thing I've had knocking around about the absurdity of someone selling a large suitcase. I'll explore that.
No, I love that. I think my curiosity somewhat stems from the fact, and I've shared this before in terms of like, I'm a big song lyrics guy, Dan, and I used to love like poring over lyrics and really teasing out like, oh, what are they talking about here? And of course, interpretation always is in the eye of the beholder, I suppose, and I'm always trying to draw things out. But yeah, I guess as writers, and this is true for me as well, we have to face the fact that not everything is one-to-one, not everything means something. Sometimes it's just where we like the way something sounds, or we find a certain image or situation humorous, I suppose. Your book is complemented by your author website as well, Dan, which is an absolute
Thank
riot.
You for noticing.
It kind of looks like, someone's kind of been in WordPress or even, didn't you used to be able to make web pages in like PowerPoint or something? Maybe I'm
I'm sure there was a way where you could make them and then you could upload them somehow using your internet provider, iPrimus or something.
Yeah, but it's got this great green and pink flashes going on, and I mean, again, it does tie into that theme of like, are we at the end of the internet here, and what does that look like? I don't know, it's a bit of it would look at home on like a Tim and Eric sketch is what I'm trying to say. So
that's a compliment. Thank you.
Absolutely. I have so much admiration for people who just run with their ideas, however bizarre they are, because that's just my sense of humor, I suppose. Dan, how did you get started in terms of forming yourself into the poet you are now? How did you get started in sharing your work?
I love this question, and that trial and error is the shortest answer I can give to it. And it's interesting to reflect on, especially now I have my first book out, like, how did I arrive at this? And it's interesting because I've always been interested in performing, but I wouldn't call myself a slam poet, and I'm not a slam poet, but the most I've ever learned about my own writing and refining it and exploring it and making it better, self-editing, is through performing it. And so I've arrived at it through, I think, just, trial and error, but through performing and submitting it to places a lot for a long time, like over 10 years now. But for me, it was the performance part that always helped me to refine my work for two reasons. Probably number one being that, I said I'd do this reading, I better write or finish something. I've got a lot of things started, but not a lot of things finished. So it's like, oh man, I have to read something. I can't just read some notes or just like disparate junk. I need to sit down and consolidate and etc. So that helped, having that deadline, more so than even a publication deadline. Because like, oh man, I'm going to stand in front of people. This is different to standing in front of my emails. and then performing it, seeing what people's reactions are to what I'm reading, just because something that I think is interesting or funny or whatever in private doesn't always land, obviously, in person. But then also how the words fall out of my mouth, basically. That's probably the biggest thing, because not everything I write is funny, and then things that aren't funny are harder to gauge in terms of an audience reaction. But it's a very emotive experience, not emotional, but emotive in the sense that performing and thinking, that didn't quite feel right. Not necessarily bad, just what I'm gonna think about that line a bit more, because it just sort of didn't hit. It didn't feel right. So sort of that to and fro, that trial and error with performance was a big one for me in finding, I think, probably my own voice as well. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. So when you say that you learnt how to refine the most from performing, is it you're kind of listening to that live feedback loop that only a live audience can give you, Did you ever have people, I don't know, did you ever have other writers or other people who kind of gave you some wisdom or some tips and tricks along the way?
Let me think. I don't think I ever received specific tips and tricks that I can draw on now and be there was this moment when so-and-so. It was more organic. Definitely received so much lovely feedback, especially from friends. I mean, friends can be the most honest, and sometimes, for better or worse, I might pick their brains and be like, oh, did that work? Was that actually interesting in any way? Like, was it funny, or were they just sort of sympathy laughs? Or that bit here, it felt weird when I said it. Was it worthwhile? You know, so a lot of it is like conversational, and it's that sort of social exchange, like being in, I guess, in community with other writers, that whether they write poetry or other things as well. I think you end up with that organic exchange and feedback, which I think is really lovely.
Well, congratulations again for Secret Third Thing. I'm reading on your website that it's become a very decorated book. You know, it won the Mary Gilmore Award and the Five Islands Prize. I'm going to be completely honest, I don't actually know what those are, but hey, they sound great. Maybe you can fill us in a bit more on what they are. It was also named as one of the best 25 Australian books of 2023 by The Guardian, who I am very familiar with. How has it felt to have received that kind of recognition from those kind of, I don't know, institutes?
Yeah, it's surreal. It really is. Yeah, I still can't quite believe it. I sort of have to pinch myself, because the Mary Gilmore Prize and Five Islands Prize, the people who sort of decide on those prizes, I have a great deal of respect and admiration for their work and insight, their research, their poetry, and all the rest. And it's still, it doesn't feel real. It's like, oh, I'm just some guy. Like, have I tricked them? What's this? Huh?
How's the imposter syndrome?
Oh yeah, it rears its ugly head from from time to time, especially after having some success. It's like, oh no, you know, the terrifying ordeal of being perceived as well feeds into it. But it's of course very nice and very validating. It's extremely validating. It's like, oh yeah, you're onto something here. You know, keep going. Yeah, but honestly, it's surreal. I try not to think about or dwell on it too much, because I feel like that, for me personally, would get in the way of continuing to produce work. Like, it's nice in the moment and all that, and I'm certainly extremely grateful for it. It's weird and great. I don't know.
No, it's a fantastic sum up. I want to get into some of your experiences in teaching now, Dan, because many of our guests overlap into that world. I think there's something wonderful to know that there are educators out there who are also having, you know, the courage and conviction to exercise their creativity. You know, you mentioned you've been in the game for a while. You know, you got some long service leave happening at the moment. How does your poetry and your experience in teaching overlap? What are you seeing in the modern classroom?
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about, because those two things I used to mentally compartmentalize. So they were very, very, very separate things to me. And so I'm a casual teacher now, and I've done that now for a very long time, and I quite enjoy that, because there's a bit more autonomy with what you can do, because often I'm thrown on a class very last minute, and they're just like, look, you got this class for an hour, just do whatever. It's all very, you know, you're sort of there on those terms. So often it's
planet Earth it is.
Yeah. So it's exciting. It means like, oh, cool, I can, you know, I've got this fun poetry lesson that we can do. So it's been really enriching in that way. And even though I teach young children, like primary school age, I do find that it informs my own, I guess, not just teaching practice, but poetic practice as well, because, you know, when I'm teaching it, often we're doing poetry. So it's primary school, so we don't spend a lot of time talking about it or theorizing or dwelling on the mechanics of poetry, whatever. It's just like, let's do some stuff, let's have some fun. And that definitely, it's helped me to evolve my own poetics, and applying that, you know, outside of my teaching practice to my private writing practice as well, especially the fun element. Yeah, and it's sort of built up over time, where now I don't compartmentalize it in that way. Some of the techniques that I teach to, you know, to school kids, to young children, I'm like, man, I'm just sitting at home now, and I've got this thing I have to finish. There's a deadline. I've said I'll do this reading. Maybe I'll just try this, you know, this technique I tried with year 3 the other day, you know, why not? Why not? Yeah, so it's definitely informed it in that way, unexpectedly as well. And then I guess in terms of outside of the classroom, but the job and the working conditions, you know, the industrial aspect of being a teacher at this stage of the 21st century is its own monolith, and that definitely informs, I guess, the the preoccupations, the themes of what I like to explore in my writing, that sort of industrial, what do you call it, industrial angst or something like that. Yeah, because it's pretty dire out there not to paint too bleak a picture of public education in this country. But if I could sum it up in a statistic, it would be that few public schools in the ACT, there's not a single public school in the whole of the country that is fully funded, which just in that you can sort of extrapolate, well, obviously teachers are under the pump then because they have to cater to the highest level of need with the least resources. So yeah, that industrial pressure has definitely found its way into my work, but usually in an absurd way. That's usually responding to that pressure in that funny way.
Oh, that's good. I'm always struck by the difference that there is or there was between getting a CRT or a substitute teacher or whatever in a primary school compared to a senior school. Because I feel like, especially in a senior school, sometimes a substitute teacher is kind of seen as like a bit of a mark. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
and it kind of becomes like... Whereas I think primary kids, generally speaking, especially in that kind of age group, are quite sweet and keen to kind of peacock a bit and show off a bit rather than give you a hard time. Is that what you found?
Oh, for sure. Like they generally want to impress. They want to and they want to try out something new. And poetry's a great one for that. Like I do one of my go-to poetry lessons, especially if I haven't had the class before, is like a form of blackout poetry, and they love it because we tear up old newspapers or whatever, any old throwaway text, and it's like, what do you mean? Because it's so tangible as well, and kind of like, what's the word? It feels rebellious. We shouldn't
tactile.
be we shouldn't be ripping up this. What's scribbling on it, and So in my experience, they're always really really interested in doing that.
Yeah, and I worked briefly in a primary school as an aide, fantastic school. And, I'm always blown away by kids and creativity. They tend to not put the kind of limits on themselves that maybe we do as an adult. And so it becomes this very joyous and very uninhibited, you know? And I think those early experiences of doing something creative and being recognized for that and being seen for that are so important. The world is full of people who have never gone on to kind of produce their greatest works because they had a negative experience of someone who didn't understand or, put their work down or whatever. So, no, I think it's a really important role that you're playing there.
I guess my motivation for that is because I had such a positive experience when I was in primary school. So I was just like a weird working class kid from San Remo going to the local public school, and for some reason was, obsessed almost to a fault with reading, but more so writing. I wanted to probably write more than I wanted to read. And I had this is in the 90s, I had such positive experiences with my teachers there, especially as I got older in primary school. Yeah, I mean, that's really when I started writing. And it was purely because of those teachers were just so encouraging, and they went above and beyond. And yeah, so that positive experience I sort of want everyone to have, want every kid to experience that. Yeah.
Amazing. And I think that is the heartbeat of every teacher. Again, another thing about me is that, many teachers in my family as well.
Yeah, great.
Or teacher adjacent people. That also means that I've seen that ideal, if you like, and I've seen it played out in good ways, but I've also had to watch it kind of sometimes be a bit crushed, just because, like you said, everyone is under the pump and funding's not there, or the lack of, reform or individual planning, or the class size is too small, whatever. There can be so many issues that come there. So, I have a lot of admiration for anyone working in education nowadays.
Thanks, Andrew.
Back to Secret Third Thing, it definitely evokes a particular, critique of capitalism, of kind of late stage capitalism, which is kind of the buzzword of where the world is at the moment. Where do you think we're headed? This is all speculation, of course. We haven't been here before, but is there going to be some new and glorious system that's going to replace what's happening at the moment?
Oh, well, that would certainly be nice. Around the time I was finishing Secret Third Thing, so a lot of the poems in it were finished, and there was a lot that were unfinished. But I was reading a really great book by Mackenzie Walk, and I hope I don't misremember the title. But the title is something to the effect of, is this capitalism or is it something worse? So basically the premise of this whole book is that looking at the evidence? Is it not possible that we've actually gone past the point of late stage capitalism, last stage capitalism, and that we're actually living under whatever the next thing is that we don't have the words for yet, and it's worse than late stage capitalism, but because it's new and we're like right in the middle of it, we haven't quite got the poetics to, I guess, enunciate what it might be called in language or how it might be defined in simple terms like late stage capitalism. Like we can't be late forever. At some point, it has to cross over to the next stage, but it makes you think, well, what comes after being late? Like, so I'm definitely a proponent of that thinking. I think where we are at now, to talk in a very broad, sweeping way and possibly at the risk of sounding overly cynical, I think we already live under something that isn't capitalism. It's sort of what late stage capitalism has evolved into, and it's far worse than late stage capitalism, and we don't quite know what it is yet.
Let's talk about the internet.
Yes.
Just a quick chat about the internet.
Yeah, no worries.
Do you think it is the internet that has led us into these kind of uncharted waters in a way?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Not the internet as a concept or even where the internet started. I would say the privatization of the internet, talking about my website is somewhat related to this in terms of aesthetics. My thinking behind that was making it look as much like an old GeoCities website as I could. The early internet, like when I was a kid, it was the Wild West. It was a free-for-all. And now there's like less than, 10 websites you might visit in earnest.
That's a good point, yeah.
And I think you're right. It's like, but it must be a lot of other things and whatnot. But the internet is definitely at the center of it because the internet is where, I guess, oligarchs, for example, Jeff Bezos, and he has a lot to answer for on this, is information infrastructure. So Amazon started in the 90s, as everyone knows, as this like online bookstore. And it's like, yeah, cool. That sounds, fairly innocent enough. But how Amazon has made its money and where Jeff Bezos made his money was having the foresight to own the means of information back in the 90s. So now, fast forward to 2024, we need information infrastructure in everything that we do. Like even I went to the post office the other day, I had to show my driver's license. It's on my phone. It's saved electronically by Service New South Wales. And then if you look at the back end of that, sorry if this gets too boring. I've done a lot of reading about this.
No, I'm up for it. Let's go.
Yeah, basically, in short, like it surprised me to learn that, and I was reading a lot about this when I was putting together Secret Third thing. A lot of this information infrastructure is owned by like 3 or 4 companies, but most of them are owned by Amazon. Like, if Amazon took away its like bookstore thing tomorrow, it would continue on totally no worries, because it has contracts with everything. Like it has whole of government contracts like Centrelink. Every time you ring Centrelink, do anything with Centrelink, you're creating revenue for Amazon because Centrelink is run through what's called Amazon Web Services. Or at least it used to. I don't know if they've changed the contract to Google, one of the other, 4 gigantic information owners. So, yeah.
And Amazon Web Services went down the other day. I mean, I know we had CloudStrike recently, but even after that, it went down, and the particular accounting software I'm involved in went down for half a day, and that was unheard of. That had never happened.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we really are putting a lot of eggs in a basket, aren't we?
Oh, yeah. It's that total, like, atomization. So there's, like, we run, like, our society is run off the backbone of this information infrastructure, but it's owned by a handful of companies. So it's so easy for Amazon to have a bad day, and then suddenly half the economy is stuffed. If Google has a bad day, I can't drive home because the toll road won't let me on or something. It's really worrying. Mackenzie Walk actually, in her book that I was talking about before, describes it as like there's a new ruling class. So the capitalist class was always seen as the ruling class. There's not a class above them. Nobody rules them. They rule us. So now and she has quite an interesting, I guess, rubric, which I think is true in observing it. There's still obviously a capitalist class, but they're almost like a secondary ruling class to what Mackenzie Walt calls the vectoralist class, and they're a ruling class that rules the ruling class. So the capitalist class, who typically own the means of production, are different to the vectoralist class, where they own the means of information. And the capitalist class can't function today in the 21st century without the vectoralist class, because so many of even their production line is often run with the aid of information infrastructure. Even if it's a bricks and mortar factory, the way that workers are paid, even the machinery, even like validating your parking at the factory, like those are the things I've described there, are either owned by Google or Amazon. That's pretty much it.
That's super interesting. And it does make you realize, because, I mean, some of this stuff I don't know a lot about. This is good to chew on for me. So, and it's funny because we have experienced, the Amazon Web Services going down, and CloudStrike, which I believe was a Microsoft thing. So we saw things like, Virgin flights were all grounded around Australia for a matter of hours. And it makes you think, like, again, without being too doomer about it, is what does a day where everything goes down, like, how do we get through that? And what is the solution? Like, I think what you're saying is that we're at a time now where the internet has changed things, because all of a sudden your ability to distribute goods and services is limitless and kind of borderless, and we haven't really been in a world where that's possible. And of course that can bring good things. But yeah, I guess you got to kind of trace it back and go, is it a good idea to have, like, a market is not going to regulate itself. A market is not going to regulate itself. And we saw even with, social media sites in America, going before the courts, and how, trying to explain exactly what their technology does, and people just kind of scratching their heads. Like, if our governments don't understand it or whatever, is the solution somehow just kind of breaking up these massive companies and getting more competition so that we're not so reliant on just a few?
Oh, absolutely, for sure. Like, I think that's just like a very sensible response to, and measured and proportionate response to, the current situation. What it requires, though, is a government that is slightly more than completely gutless, which in the Western world, that's certainly not on the horizon. They can barely turn a shoulder slightly away from fossil fuel companies, let alone gigantic tech companies that they barely understand. Like, most politicians in that field wouldn't even understand that their email is run through Amazon Web Services, and why that's an issue more broadly. But certainly, no, I think you're spot on. They need to be broken up, and because they're just monopolies now. It's I'm certainly an anti-capitalist, but if you were to try anything within the confines of capitalism, it would be certainly to, elicit more competition by breaking them up, like capping them, whatever that looks like, or kneecapping them, figuratively speaking. I think as a social response, this is something I've been thinking about. I don't know what it would look like, and I've been pondering it more in terms of AI and the rise of AI, with what like a 21st century Luddism would look like. So the machine breakers of the 19th century, who responded to the industrialization of their textile machinery, they responded by simply just breaking them. And that was a form of, I guess, enterprise bargaining through resistance. So I wonder how we could, what a 21st century Luddism would look like. I don't know what it would look like, because so much information infrastructure is seemingly intangible, and obviously there's the legal aspects of it as well. But I don't think it necessarily needs to be breaking the infrastructure or breaking the machines, because the thing ultimately is that we are the product in that form of capitalism. So, for example, if we all stopped using Instagram tomorrow, well, then Meta has just lost like a huge amount of revenue. Like, that is a way of breaking that information machine. And you literally don't have to pick up a hammer and break anything physically. You just need to stop being the product. So I think that's what a 21st century Luddism would look like, because the machine relies on you being the product. And if we stop being that, then that will have a flow-on effect. But of course, I'm being overly idealistic here. That would require a lot of organisation and collectivity. But I think it's a pretty simple premise, though, to log off in a very directed way.
Yeah. a lot of organization and collectivity, you know, in an age of kind of extremes, and a lot of, you know, there seems to be fewer and fewer things that we kind of have common ground with all of humanity. So maybe it looks like looking at that as a whole, like you said, yeah, ideals that we'll see how they play out. I really love the non-fiction writing of Johann Hari. So I'm seeing him speak in Melbourne later this year. Very exciting. Now, he mostly writes about addiction, and in his book Lost Connections, or it might be Stolen Focus actually, he talks about, can we actually put pressure on, let's say, social media companies? Can we put pressure on them to actually change their business model? So at the moment, these are free tools. They're free tools, right? Heavily reliant on advertising revenue. And so because as a result of that market structure, it means that they want to keep you engaged for as long as they can. So you are not paying anything up front, but the hours and hours are going up as they get smarter about how to manipulate you to check back in, see the advertising, whatever. I am very much on the team, if you like, of like, I would gladly pay, you know, for a social network site that got rid of all that shit and instead could, and, you know, Johann Hari talks about, could we make it so that we pay for it and then it works for us? So we can leverage its learning because it does learn about us. But I would love to see more tools that help us find the things, events, people, connections, you know, real things that help us then step away from the system. And so it doesn't become about trying to engage you in a system all day long, which is quite dystopian on its own. And we're seeing that play out in some instances, but actually changing the business model to a paid model where it can lead to other results. I don't know. I like that idea. That's something that I feel like he breaks down really well, and something I can go like, wow, that's, I understand that. I can see the benefits straight away. So
yeah, that's super interesting. It reminds me of something I've read not too long ago, and it reminds me that I should, you know, read more about it. But I read something, I can't remember who it was by, and I'm going to describe this probably vaguely, but the idea is publicly owned internet or publicly owned social media. So yeah, you, like you described, it might require like a membership fee, but you're not handing, you know, money over to Meta or to Amazon, or, you know, some the ruling class. Basically, you're handing it over to your fellow people. So it's circular and it's owned basically by you. It's sort of like I guess it's not dissimilar to taxation in a way. It's circular in that sense, but it also means that the way that it's run, its interests are completely different, and advertising isn't required. Yeah, and the benefit, you know, comes back. But yeah, like I said, it's something I read vaguely about that I'm always thinking, I should read about this idea of publicly owned social media or publicly owned internet and what that could look like. It would certainly go a long way to, or at least challenge, you know, those big oligarchs who are sort of very much ruling the show right now.
And sometimes it's just about how much noise you can make, you know. I think we've had so little time to look into what these new technologies are kind of doing to us. But we're starting to get a picture, you know, and it's not a great picture. And I guess it's like, all right, is this what we want to head towards? Or do we want to, you know, consider the needs of the human race, you know, and take away that really addictive quality? Like we've seen the documents that have been leaked about this is all kind of deliberate. I'm really hopeful. I'm not a particularly, you know, politically active person, for better or worse, but it looks like we might finally be getting some movement on like banning gambling advertising in Australia, which I would love to see. Yeah. Because like those fuckers don't add anything to life in Australia. You know, they profit off pain and suffering. I'm not asking for like a ban on gambling at all. I mean, that comes with its own problems. But, you know, people know where to find it. And like, you know, as someone with young nephews and nieces, like they don't need to fucking know the odds when they're looking at these things. And it's like, just get rid of it. Like, let's go. I'm ready.
Yeah, and it's just the advertising element. We're not talking about prohibiting gambling, because I don't think prohibition would work. You know, but you don't have to advertise it. Like, you don't see cigarette ads on the telly anymore.
Great
like,
example.
You can still smoke if you want. Like, yeah, it's just advertising. It seems like, why would you just get rid of it? Like, whatever, man. Everyone knows it exists. It's not some big secret. It's legal.
And again, another Johann thing, you know, he talks about, I think there is a country out there that has banned advertising in public spaces. And I was like, like, you know, I'm trying to drive here. I don't need bloody skyscrapers telling me about what's coming up on Binge, you know. Thank you for your perspective, you know. And yeah, again, I think your work taps into these kind of nightmarish scenarios that, you know, if things don't change, we might be headed towards. So yeah, it definitely got me thinking, Dan. Cool. I'd love to hear your second piece, Dan. You got that ready for us?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure do. All right, so this poem is called Blade of Grass, Meadow of Knives. Summer equals cicada scream plus other superimpositions hung in the air like an idea of bunting, but never the worsted wool. I'm no mathematician, but who is? Nobody in this poor excuse for a nondescript prism hurtling birthday toward your 10th coffee is free. A pop-out cake is a large prop designed to resemble a cake in which a person emerges to the surprise of outsiders. Innovation and jobs and growth have seen a little seat inside. When the alarm went off this morning, I wasn't yet the genealogy of an image, but who is? Who? Everybody inside a pop-out cake has two wolves inside them. Both are domesticated. One is a Chihuahua/Pomeranian cross, the other is red. Anyway, there is no gimmick like home. I once knew a Pomeranian who, despite the limits of their form, taught me bagel is short for baby angel. I digress. But also, when in Rome, stuff a pie full of doves and frogs and have them burst forth for your guests. This is all to say grief is a detour. When in Rome, I desire for this loss to manifest as something, anything, handsome in writing, but all I've got is this fixation on pop-out cakes, and the loudest cicadas are the ones who stayed in the ground the longest. But don't take my word for it. Ear to the ground until the lawn's urge has cut through to the other side. Blade of grass, meadow of knives. Find a veranda and wait. See what I'm saying? When in the yard, ask yourself, what fangs out of the bracken with a head full of garden? The answer and everything on this page is... Yeah, thanks. That was Blade of Grass, Meadow of Knives.
Beautiful. I was just reminded about another kind of reoccurring motif in the collection, which is you describe a bird with feathers of crowbars. Is that correct?
Yeah.
There may not be a one-to-one kind of thing in there, but it almost makes me think of a, like Edgar Allan Poe's The Crow or something, I don't know, this kind of herald of bad times to come, this bird with feathers of crowbars. I don't know. Was there a particular thing you were going for with that? Or again, is it just part of the illustrious imagination that goes through the work?
How did I come to that one? I remember that was something that I definitely had lodged in notes. That was just like, this image of a bird with feathers like crowbars. And it's like, and I always wanted to use it in something. I think I use it a bunch of times possibly throughout poems because I'm always unsatisfied with how I've used it. It's just like, I haven't, there's something more to it. Oh, I'll put it here. That's all right. Because I think I like the idea because I think the symbol of a bird in the most broadest of sense, people come to the idea of a bird or an image of a bird with a lot of their own ideas ready to go, bird of peace or bird of prey, pigeons, etc.
Guinea chickens.
So I think, I think it was interesting to sort of graft that image of the crowbar onto not so much the image of the bird, because I don't describe the bird beyond that, but, people's preconceptions of not birds as the real thing, but as a symbol and as a cultural element. Yeah. And it's also interesting you picked that out because I've also, for a number of years now, been trying to write some fiction that's based around a crowbar bird, but in a physical sense, like a real sense. So yeah, it's definitely, for some reason, I have a fixation on it and it's an ongoing work.
I like that though. And I feel like I could learn from that because I'm someone who, when I'm writing, I try not to repeat particular things, and it can be my downfall because if something is a reoccurring motif that it keeps coming out, whether it's a phrase or an image, I think there's something to that. So, and I think putting that limit on yourself, saying, "Oh no, I've used that." It can even come down to a specific word. I'm like, "Oh no, I've used the word heart too much, or the word love too much. It's too general." And it's like, no, it's okay. It's okay. Just reframe it.
Yeah, if it works, it works, and it's it's your cloth that you're cutting. You know what I mean? I've thought about that before as well, and the reason that it goes back to what I was saying earlier about trial and error through performance. So often it's like, oh man, I said I'd do this reading. I've got to finish this poem. I really liked the line from that other poem I did at the last reading. The rest of it was a failure, but that one line I kind of like. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to put it in this one, which I want to give a go. So I've sort of developed that repetition. But I also am fully aware that that's sort of not the rules. Not that I set out to break the rules. It was more just meh. people can call it whatever they want. This is what I'm going to do. Like, what are you going to do? Fire me? Mate, I was born fired. But the way I think of it, if I was to like reflect on it and attempt to intellectualize it, and I hope this is encouraging for others, like you're saying, just to go for it. Like there is actually no rules, and actually nobody cares if you repeat a line, an image, a word, whatever. Is that like, as a writer or a poet, you're cutting out your own lingo, your own argot, your own cloth, so to speak. So I think it's writers who do that are interesting. Do you know what I mean? It sort of speaks to the bigger work. Because I think so often poetry collections are seen, they're certainly not like this, but they're often perceived as being like, oh, here's just like some ramshackle collection of poems put into a book. I think the word collection often does it a disservice when really the poet is doing something much more interesting than just collecting things in print. I think it's true of any book of poetry. And often the repetition in their choice of lingo, I think, can spell out some of that, or give, the reader something to chew on, some clues, if you want to call it that. Yeah, I could definitely ramble and rant on about that sort of thing all day.
It's funny as well because I will typically write in a performance style and to perform. Now, yeah. I love a pop culture reference, though. I love a pop culture reference is what I'm trying to say. And sometimes I'm caught in this thing where I'm like, okay, is what I'm putting into the work, is that too specific? Like, who is that for? It's for me, really. It's me laughing at myself, really. But, I went to this workshop, which was kind of for people who hadn't written poetry for the stage before. And the person running it was very clear that when you write to perform, you should be clear about what you're talking about or you're going to lose people. And I didn't say this in the time, but I kind of didn't agree. I think maybe if you're trying to maybe win a comp or something, then that's probably more advisable. But I love just putting Easter eggs in, and I'm just like, this is for a very specific person. And sometimes there's nothing better than hearing, one person gasp at the back of the room and everyone else is silent, because you're like, that was for you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. That is such a good feeling when that happens. Like, it's just like, yes, I've succeeded in the biggest way. It's for that one person and that one gasp. Like.
So, I was sharing this piece yesterday, which was about failure, actually. It's about failure and resilience. And the line was something like, failure, can you show me that valleys are just potholes and Chumbawamba were prophets? And I sat down and I was like, oh, shit, like, does anyone actually know who Chumbawamba are, kind of thing? And again, if you know, you know. That's basically what I'm fucking doing when I'm on stage. It's like, if you know, you know. Maybe we can talk a bit about, what do you think of kind of that tension of being accessible, whether that's valuable to you or not, I guess is another question, between being accessible and being yourself, I don't know, and doing your own thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I have a lot of thoughts on this because one bit of feedback I get with some frequency is like, oh, I don't get it, or it's great, but I don't know what it means. Yes. And my thing with that is always just like, well, you do know what it means because you experienced it. It's just, I don't think people trust in their own experience of it. David Lynch has this really nice little quote that he comes to quite often because he's often asked as well, like, oh, this doesn't make sense. What does it mean? God, just tell us. We want to know, what does Mulholland Drive mean? What's Twin Peaks? What's that? What's the, And his thing is and he's very guarded and he won't tell, oh, look, it's this. It's a metaphor for that. It was this, that, and the other. His thing is always just like, the clues are there. Like, how you experience those clues is your experience of the work. That's the meaning of it. And actually, while you were talking, it reminded me of something that the log lady said from Twin Peaks. I don't know if you're familiar with Twin Peaks. Yeah. No, that's all right. No, yeah. She's a character in Twin Peaks. I guess you would say a minor character. She carries a log. But there was, I think, oh God, I'm going to misremember this, but they had her introducing some of the episodes. So it'd be separate to whatever happens in that episode. And she was just a talking head with her log. She would say something, episode would start. And there's this really, I might read it if that's all right, really great quote, which I think resonated with me along the lines of what we're talking about. So the log lady said, there are clues everywhere, all around us, but the puzzle maker is clever. The clues, although surrounding us, are somehow mistaken for something else. And the something else, the wrong interpretation of the clues, we call our world. I don't want to become too cynical again, talking about the internet and all that, but I think culture has become, it's cornered us. It's like we need things that are didactic. They're a sugar rush. We need to know what it is now. It needs to be like hyper clear. But the thing is, if the window's too clear, the birds are just going to fly into it and the window's going to smash, and then you've got to clean up the mess. It becomes this big deal. So you don't want the window, you need a bit of dirt on the window so the birds don't fly into it, and so that, you get your bond back on your rental. I really like the idea of that. And this is something I've reminded myself, I don't know where I got it from, but it was a long time ago. Maybe it's something someone said to me, was that meaning is inescapable, which doesn't mean like, you just throw a big slab of text at the document and be like, ha, you decide, reader. It's extremely premeditated. But for me as a reader as well, I really, like you were saying, I enjoy those Easter eggs. I enjoy unpacking it. Sometimes I just like enjoy the language without thinking about it too much. But if I want to, well, then I can, and I might interpret it in a way that is wrong, but that creates its own world. Yeah.
It's funny because there seems to be like a whole industry of content of like explaining endings of films. Do you know what I mean? And just pulling things out to the nth degree. And it's not helped by the fact that, the only films people seem to be going to see nowadays are these big, interconnected IP things where, I saw Deadpool and Wolverine, like everyone in the world, and it was fine. It was fine. I had a good time with my friend, and I laughed and whatever. I'm not down on it necessarily.
Yeah.
I like those things existing, but it's not a movie. Like it's not, or at least it's not a film in the traditional sense. It's some other highly masturbatory. Like it's fan service. Now, fan service is great as a flavor, but I just felt like I was being doused with a fire hose of fan service. And I don't actually want that. I want something that will give me something that I didn't know that I wanted, even if it's just a great story, let's get back to that. Yeah. And ambiguity is interesting. We're still debating what is the expression on the Mona Lisa's face, And back to film, someone like a J.J. Abrams, love him or hate him, his, obsession with this mystery box thing and how whether or not he's meeting his own expectations that he sets down, like it's undeniably effective. I remember how much water cooler talk there was about like what is going on in Lost. It was almost like a blockbuster Twin Peaks, if you like, having these very disparate, very strange elements. And again, whether or not a landing was stuck, maybe there's more to learn from having some ambiguity and not letting everyone feed from your hand all the time. I don't know, just a thought.
Absolutely. Yes to all to everything that you said. Absolutely. I think ambiguity is often confused with being vague, but there's like obviously a very distinct. And this is the challenge for, anyone making any kind of art, whether it's literary, visual, cinema, music. I'm sort of, in my own practice, I go for like a premeditated ambiguity, which means it can never be vague, because I think vagueness often is what comes out in things that are designed to be overly didactic, because really you're watching it and you're going, well, this is too clear. I'm the bird who just flew into the window because I didn't see it. And I don't know, why would I do that, So I think often the things that are overly didactic are the things that end up being vague because their purpose is so obvious to the point of pointlessness. If that makes sense. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
No, it's good. I'll tack on to that and say, like, obviously in the age of algorithms that we find ourselves in, how much do we miss out on when it comes to art and culture because we're being served up something that is kind of pre-calculated? Do you know what I mean? Like, I would have never come across like the Indian film RRR by myself. And yet I'd never watched much Indian cinema. And yet it was like this fantastic, bombastic piece of cinema.
It feeds into that, I guess, like, what's the word? Like, that dopamine cycle, you felt pleasure from this thing, like, oh, how about check out this other thing? And then when you've checked that out, what about this? And this is like, it goes back to what you were saying about it being an addictive cycle, because of course it is. That's how our brains are wired, to experience joy, whatever that might be.
Yeah, no, spot on. I want to take a bit of a deep dive into the creative process now. So, Dan, I felt like you've given us a lot of insight on this already, but did you have any other thoughts about how you go about just kind of congealing all these ideas into a finished piece, and where do you go to find inspiration? Does it strike through the pop culture soup like it does for a lot of us, or are you coming across real life stories in your experience as a teacher, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, it's a bit of all of the above. I'm a meticulous, or maybe meticulous isn't the word, chaotic is a better word, a chaotic collector of notes. So I think the notes come before, like, I start the poem. So which is its own kind of spark. It's sort of like the kindling. So often I might be watching something or driving or even just walking and thinking, and like I'll collect either like an idea. So it's not necessarily the words, but I'll be like, oh, I want to write about that thing. That's weird. That thing I just saw. Or sometimes it is the capturing the vernacular, like how someone spoke or how I caught myself speaking, and decontextualizing that and chucking it in the notes and then coming back to it later. One thing I've realized that I enjoy as a writer, as a poet, is collecting all those notes and not looking what's in them and then having some distance from them for a while, like almost forgetting about them and then returning to them later, like opening up that document and being like, oh, this line, what is that? Let's go. It's like it just fires off something, like it's a very physical almost form of inspiration where I've collected the thing earlier. I know why it was interesting at the time, but I haven't looked at it in ages and I can't remember and it's not important, but it's like, oh, that strikes me. I'm going to, sort of see what comes from just riffing off that line. And often it starts as a riff. I often think of that as, and I think of this of a lot of writing as well, it's an act of improvisation. But improvisation isn't just like you're thrown in the deep end and you just do whatever. There's an art to it. There's actually a process that is not scripted per se, but you need the kindling. Otherwise you've got nothing to burn. So often, collect the notes and then I'll go back and look at them and enjoy them. And then one of them will spark and that's when I'll get the riff on that. And then obviously a more like, I guess, like traditional editing or self-editing process will flow from.
Nice. And when you do get around to, I guess, doing the work, are you a cabin in the woods, going away to a cabin in the woods kind of person or locking the door, do not disturb kind of person? Or does it come in fits and starts, in amongst all the other things in life?
Oh yeah, it definitely comes in between everything else that's going on in life. Like I'm lucky in the sense that like I can write wherever, whenever. Sometimes it can be, I guess, inconvenient. Like I've annoyed my partner, I'll be sitting in bed at night and go, I need to put this in my phone, right now. And then suddenly it's like, why are you awake, man? Like put the phone away. It's like, oh yeah, no, fair enough. So like it definitely happens in between. I think someone said something to me a long time ago, not to get comfortable with like doing something one way. So, I'll sit there and write a poem on my phone and then look at it again later on my desktop or whatever. And there's some benefit to that because it means that you'll see the same thing that you're writing, but you'll see it with fresh eyes just for the sheer fact you've written it on 3 different devices, whether, even if one of the devices is like a handwritten notebook. Yeah, so I'm definitely like a proponent and advocate of chaos in that sense. It works for me. I know it doesn't work for anyone. I'll have the cabin in the woods, but I'll also just have my phone on the bus.
Yeah, just keep it simple. And I would be very surprised if a work like, Secret Third Thing came out of a place of like having a clean desk with, utensils perfectly set up and your favorite, gold-tipped fountain pen or whatever. It almost feels like a piece of work that's beamed in from the future or something, something like that. So it's good to see that it sounds like your craft kind of reflects the final product in that way. I want to know what's kind of next for you, Dan. I've seen on your website that you've been able to secure some funding for a novel that you're working on. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. I won the Creative Australia lottery there, and I'm very lucky actually. I got some funding over the next 6 months. I'm sort of in the midst of it now to work on a novel. So that's what's been occupying my time, especially as you said before, I'm on long service leave at the moment. So it's been quite nice just being able to like really immerse myself in that work. And so certainly novel writing is something very different for me. And it's not something that comes extremely naturally to me at all. Yes, that's what's coming. That's what I'm working on at the moment. I might completely fail in that, but it's definitely really nice to have the opportunity to do it and be paid to do it it's really, really great.
And it's funny because I've only just realised where you might have taken the title of this work from. So you're calling it Frog, I believe, with a PH. Yeah,
The Frog. Yeah, with a PH. Frog. That's right.
Okay, can I take a stab at this one, Dan? Was this something?
Oh, please do.
Was this something, okay, I think this is a meme which I saw. Someone went to an Airbnb and someone had left a picture on like a whiteboard on the fridge of like a really, really jacked frog kind of thing, and they'd called it Frog with a PH. Am I on the right track or no?
I have not heard that at all. Like, that's
interesting.
That's a really great story, but I'm going to look it up after this. But no, that's not my inspiration for titling it "The Frog with a PH." But that's really funny. Yeah, I've definitely fallen down that rabbit hole of the internet where people have just made things that shouldn't be really buff, like really buff Shrek or really buff Winnie the Pooh, or in this case, a tree frog or something. Where I got it from is frog with a PH comes from frogging. So frogging with a PH is a phenomenon that I guess has emerged, to my understanding anyway, in the last 10 years or so as the housing crisis has gained severity. And what it is, frogging is where a person...
It's people living in other people's homes unbeknownst to them?
That's exactly right. And then not to outstay their welcome, they leapfrog somewhere else before they're noticed.
Oh, wow. How strangely scary.
And,
and unique. Yeah.
Yeah, obviously.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I can see that. That's such a great premise, and I can see that as a premise for almost like a horror, if you like, or something else. So I'm curious to see what direction you take it. You hail from Sydney, Dan, which I think is the most expensive Australian city to live in at the moment.
Yeah.
And I know that on your website, you sell these caps with that I think say "Death to Landlords" on it.
Let's say abolish landlords.
Apologies, abolish landlords. Let's not get too violent here. But do you have any thoughts on that as well? I mean, we've talked plenty about capitalism, but I feel disappointed that we as a country, we seem to be all about houses and holes, as in mines, we really haven't thought about having a wide range of industries that we can kind of rely on as an economy. So what do you think is the way forward with this issue as well? Yeah,
and honestly, the problem with housing is in Australia, in this country, is actually the reasons for it are very simple, therefore the solutions are very simple. And the reason that housing is so scarce in this country is because there's too many landlords. There's an undersupply of housing because there's an oversupply of landlords. It's that simple. Do you know what I mean? It's that simple. You abolish landlordism, then suddenly the prices of housing will drop. That's just how it is. But of course, no capitalist politician is going to want to drive down the cost of housing by banning landlordism. But in my view, and people will call it extreme or radical, whatever, that there's no sound reason that landlordism should exist during a housing crisis, or at all, really. Landlordism isn't even capitalist. It's left over from the feudal system. It's just this vestigial feudal apparatus that has survived into capitalism, which, of course, capitalists love. But, myself as an anti-capitalist, to be fair, at least capitalists make stuff. You know what I mean? They might exploit workers to make those things, but at least they are making things, I guess. They are making things. That's just true. The problem is exploitation. Landlords, though, generate nothing. They generate nothing, they create nothing. Capitalists will often argue, well, we employ these people, we give them jobs, we give them livelihoods. A landlord doesn't do any of that. And, often the argument is, oh, well, we give them housing. And it's like, no, man, if landlordism didn't exist, I'd still have a place to live, because landlordism isn't natural or innate, I could rant on. If you already have a house that you own and you're living in it, you don't need another one. What's that? Do you know what I mean? No one's going to take your house that you live in. Everyone needs that. It's this thing in Australia where it's this country is just forget housing as a right. It's an investment. You know what I mean? And if you can't aspire to that investment, well, it's people think being a landlord is something to aspire to, or it's this thing that, should be...
Or that it's easy, it's seen as this kind of low risk thing. And yet, not enough thought is put into whether you get involved with it. You should be look, and this is the problem, fucking crypto and stuff, and this sexiness to investment and divestment and stuff. It's way too slick. It should always be boring and just I'm trying to say a few things. Firstly, it is ridiculous that we have a commissioner for homelessness or whatever that has umpteen rental properties.
Yes.
I think again. Do we want systems like landlordism involved in, what is a necessity for a human? Shelter, food, health, if you like the things that without them, we go, well, I guess I'll just fucking die, why do we have systems, capitalist systems that are involved in that? And also, just seeing it as an investment. I mean, I think the time of prosperity that the baby boomers enjoyed, it's over. Seeing landlordism and having rental properties as this badge of honor, we just need to find new things to do, I suppose, because there's so many risks to it. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure we all have a situation where someone is not following their obligations in terms of cleaning up black mold or fixing the fucking roof or whatever the deal might be.
Yeah. So diversifying, or just having other investment options for people, but it's what's the word? Culturally, it's permissible or something.
Yeah, I saw this, again, to go back into meme culture, because I know that's how our generation understands these things. I saw one of Elmo talking to one of the other Sesame Street puppets, and they were saying, but if your landlord can't afford their mortgage without you paying the rent, then you're providing them with a house or something like that.
Well, that's exactly.
Oh, wow. I never thought about that.
Well, that's exactly it. Every cost gets passed on to the tenant, bar a few rates and fees. So, but you're paying for that house, really. You're paying your landlord's mortgage if they don't own it outright, which most times, of course, they don't, because of this aspirational culture where people are like, oh, I made it. I've got this investment property. I'm a landlord. Oh, can you believe it? I must be doing something, right? It's inherently exploitative in that way. And because capitalism is designed for things to always appreciate in value, or certainly housing is for some reason, not everything does, but there's this weird expectation that investment is rock solid, not even just low risk free, which of course I think a lot of these landlords got a rude shock during the pandemic, but have learned nothing from the risks that are inherent to it. It just feels like autopilot for our culture as well. People who are lucky enough to come into some money, and I'm not judging them on that, whatever, man, but it just seems like this autopilot thing. Oh, I've got this inheritance, or I've won lottery, or whatever it is, got a promotion. Oh, I better get an investment home. You have to do. That's just what you do when you come into some money. So I think we need to, I don't know, address that. There's definitely an autopilot thing. And then because once that autopilot's engaged, people don't like being told what to do. And they certainly don't like being told, oh, you're a landlord, you're doing something that's, morally bankrupt. So I think flowing on from what you're saying, then people, I think culturally there needs to be, if you want to invest, I feel like I'm being quite generous here, but maybe try to do something else. But I think culturally it needs to be seen, because at the moment people are just oh, well, yeah, that's just what you do. You do that because what else are you going to do with it? If you are to invest, but why not just live your life? That's what I say.
Yeah. Number go up. Number only go up.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I don't know. There's that sense of frustration that, I think everyone's feeling this, where there used to be a time when your job would be a livable wage, and I feel like it's just kind of blowing out of proportion. And that's right. Housing prices, and down my neck of the woods, they changed the name of a suburb, right?
Yeah.
And that automatically puts housing prices up by 10%. What is that? That is some weird sorcery there. That is some weird speculative mind trick that's being played there.
Oh, yeah, it's a casino. That's just casino mentality. I remember they did the same thing up here in Sydney years and years ago. There's a suburb over the northern beaches here called Harbord, and they changed it to Freshwater. It's just why? It's also neither of those names are the actual name of the place, but it's for reasons like what you're describing there. Obviously, it's because it seems, I don't know, does it instill consumer confidence or something? This intangible consumer confidence that drives up market prices? I don't know.
It just makes me realise, and in my former work, sometimes this was if I was very stressed, this would be a comforting thought of we made it up. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
We made up these systems, and we made, money is just, I'm not saying it's not real, I'm saying we made it up. So it is very real, but we made it up. And so that means we can make up other things.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, that's a big ship to turn. But,
of course, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I see it in the micro in terms of, various kind of programs or intentional communities, whether they be commercially run or privately run or whatever. Anyway, I'm enjoying this little tangent a little bit too much. So let's bring it in again. Let's imagine you're in your high rental Sydney home or whatever, and there's going to be a dinner party. It's going to be a poetry dinner party, and we talk about on the show that everyone wants to bring the main piece, the main turkey, the main dish energy, which is exactly what Doane described you as, Dan.
Thanks, Doane.
But in your heart of hearts, what kind of food is your work that you're bringing?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Maybe, I was thinking about this, maybe turducken. Do you know about turducken?
Of course,
Yeah.
yes.
So for listeners who don't know about turducken, maybe I'll just describe it. It's fairly simple and horrific. Turducken is where like a chicken, like a roast chicken, is stuffed inside a duck, and then that is stuffed inside a turkey for all to enjoy and be horrified and aghast upon. Yeah, that's turducken. I think turducken because possibly it's absurd, but it's a real thing. But also there's like the presence of a turducken implies menace or threat for some reason, even though there isn't really one there. Just eat it or don't. But its presence seems to imply threat, but It's unclear whether the threat is past or it was created through duress or what, I don't know. Yeah, so I would unfortunately go with turducken for better or worse.
I've been lucky enough in my life to have never seen a turducken in the flesh, but I'm sure if I did, I would be intimidated. I would be sweating, and I probably wouldn't touch it. I'd admire it for what it was, but I probably wouldn't touch it. So it would become very much a conversation piece.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I've never seen one in the flesh either. But in isolation, I'll eat chicken, I'll eat duck, I'll eat turkey, no worries. But that assemblage and the way it goes, I don't know if I was presented with it, maybe I think I'd probably have the same reaction to you. Conversation start. It's almost like an ornamental piece. But yeah, I don't know if I could eat it, even though it is what it is.
So many people are like, I don't like my foods touching or whatever. Well, maybe I'm on that board as well. I don't really want my meats inside of each other, I suppose. I don't know. I'm not exactly culinarily adventurous, let's say. So that is a fantastic answer. Thank you for that. You've subverted the too much turkey meme that we talk about. Too much turducken. Very good.
It's a great question.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I've been thrilled with the variety of answers. Everything from like overpoweringly sweet desserts to mocktails to turducken. So this party it's got something for everyone. Even people who like turducken. As we move towards the end here, Dan, you now have a lot of responsibility on your shoulders because you get to name drop artists who you'd like to see featured on the show. Did you have someone in mind that you'd like me to reach out to?
Yeah. Oh, look, I'm going to cheat a little bit. There's two people that I think would be so great for you to chat to.
Everyone wants to name two.
Of course they do.
Can't give it to one.
I know. When you put that question to me in an email, the first two people I thought of was Alison Whittaker, who's the author of Blackwork and Lemons in the Chicken Wire. I hope I'm not misremembering the title of Alison's first book there. But yeah, an extraordinary writer and poet. Yeah, I would love to hear you guys wax lyrical. And the other person I thought of instantly was also Sarah Saleh, who is a brilliant writer of poetry and fiction. And her book, The Flirtation of Girls, Ghazal al-Banat, came out late last year, 2023. Yeah, and I've read Sarah's work over the years and I've seen her perform, and again, would be a great person to have a conversation with, I think, because I just really like Alison and Sarah's work. It's just phenomenal stuff.
Beautiful. Oh, okay. I've got my work cut out for me. 2025 is filling up with all kinds of names. So, I'll be reaching out very soon. Thank you for that, Dan.
Yeah, no.
Dan, if anyone wants to find out more about yourself or your work and maybe follow when The Frog is coming out, highly anticipated, where should they head to?
Yeah, I guess I'll announce my website. I've never plugged my website before. This is. Oh,
you've deprived the world of the visual spectacle, mate. We need more traffic on that thing.
Yeah, and I've had this URL for years now. It must be 5 years now at least, maybe longer. Anyway, if you head to www.2dan2hogan.com, that is my awful looking website. There's some info on there where you can click your way through to Secret Third Thing and other various things that I've written or am involved in as well. Yeah, 2Dan2Hogan.
Excellent. Two Dan, two Hogan. It's all about family, as they say, Very, very good. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you, Dan.
It's been great. Thanks, Andrew.
Really unique. You're going to leave us with one last piece before we wrap up?
Yeah. This poem is from Secret Third Thing as well, and it wasn't the one I intended to read third, but after the conversation we just had, it dawned on me that, this one is particularly relevant to some of the chat that we've had here. It's called A Life of Prizes. Be the counterfeit queen of the premeditated argo you want to see in the world. Rupture this, rupture that, a circle, possessed. Know the last thing by how close it is to the first thing. Remove all your clothes. From the washing machine, sicko. Learn the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, while huffing black mould. Feathers, make good toothpicks. Anything can be a toothpick if you have a go. Cop a mouthful. The best form of welfare is a feather. Phone light floods the holes in your body, soundless and high-pitched blue. Hit the snooze button. 10 more minutes of blissful nowhereness. At a time when the sky has been slapped, home is a gimmick. Mow a little lawn, make a little love, and one day posh snorkel. Yowza, yowza, yowza. Collaborate with doom, doomed if you do, doomed if you don't. Commission the havoc of birds with feathers like crowbars to pry open new skies. Time? It stumbles as you stick your leg out the window of your luxury apartment. How do you find something when you don't know what it's called? A crowbar bird circles overhead, scheming. The trillionaire class emerges and the biosphere collapses. This world isn't big enough for the two of us. Every minute of every day, a vector possessed by a new ruling class. Jimmy the locks. Wait for the image to take hold. Shouldn't be long now. Yowza, yowza, yowza. If you liked this, you might also like this headache from licking ice cream too fast. 1 trillion. What of the muted sun inherited? The hour dispenses its smallest trifles to its buffest minutes. Troubles accumulate. Midnight, Thursday, late night shopping. The night is but a kitten. Meow. See also. Meow. A collision in cahoots. See the cars parked in scarce clumps, but don't take my word for it. Check the oblong allotments. White boxes painted on black asphalt. Describe zero as both nothing and a mouth. Envelopment. What is a car park if not the reaper's shadow Julianed myriad ways? So on, and so the evening arranges its droplets on the sky's keep cup. Sip slowly, hands free. Portending the spectre of an ending, enter KFC dressed as Ronald McDonald. Be the counterfeit queen of the premeditated argo you want to see in the KFC. And one day, a life of prizes. Thank
Brilliant.
you.
It makes me think, so that line, A Life of Prizes, makes me think of like working towards something, that will never happen. I don't know. It's very evocative.
Yeah.
It's very evocative. So Secret Third Thing, it's out now from Cordite Books. Dan Hogan, truly an artist at the height of their powers. Go get your copy today and experience some of the concepts that we've talked about today. Thank you so much for coming on, Dan.
Thank you, Andrew. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Weetabix hands, what's that all about?